from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. We're just a couple of days away from the NFL Draft. And tonight, we are going to go over the latest rumors revolving around the first round. We're going to start things there because the Broncos are in prime position at number 9 to maybe take one of the top quarterbacks. They might be able to trade back. They might stay put and take an offensive tackle. This is such a weird situation, Ben, because they did put themselves in a position where they don't have a desperate need. Some people would argue that because of the quarterback, right? But they're not in a desperate position. However, at the same time, they need an impact player. This is a 5-win team. They need a player that can help them this year and hopefully beyond. So I guess where we sit right now.
Well, I mean, in terms of needing an impact player, I mean, doesn't every team need an impact player, you know?
Well, right.
But I think
you're looking to bounce back as fast as possible. And I mean, you're right. I guess we can make that argument for everybody.
I think they're flexible in this one. I think if you look at the Broncos right now, there aren't really any glaring holes. You would have some people suggest that the quarterback position could be, but I don't think beyond that, I don't think there's any glaring hole. I think you could roll this team out there and you would expect them to be as is a 500 football team, give or take. If the ball bounces the right way, you go a little bit the other direction, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they're flexible. I think they can look at this and see what falls in their lap. If something that they don't like falls in their lap, they have an opportunity to trade back. If they can't trade back, they can make a pick. I don't think that they need somebody to just come out here and be a signature player in this draft. I think that this draft for George Paton should be about accumulating capital and laying the foundation for where this team is going to go from here under his stewardship.
I was sort of thinking about this earlier today about how we're in a little bit of a weird spot for the Broncos because historically around this time we have an idea of a leaning. Right? Like you, a couple of years ago, you knew it was going to be Garrett Bowles. Mm-hmm. Last year, you knew it was going to be Jerry Jeudy. Mm-hmm. Years before, we said, well, the defensive side of the ball, John Elway likes drafting the defensive side of the ball. So we just had inklings on what they're going to do. This year, it feels like with George Paton, we could throw a lot of things against the wall, and a lot of things could be true.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of options. I think if a specific quarterback was there, that would be the pick. I think that if they are unable to trade back, I think Rashawn Slater would get heavy consideration if he's there. I know some people have talked about Micah Parsons. That would be in the conversation, although I think a little lower. I think the personal preference for the Denver Broncos in this situation would be to trade back. I do. Whether or not they ultimately accomplish that, I don't know. But I think that their preference would be to trade back, accumulate capital for next year, get a player that they like in this draft, and move forward.
Almost like I've said for a while that I thought the Broncos might be drafting fewer players than others said, but that's no big deal.
More players, more capital for this.
I know, but for next year.
Some for next year, some for this year as well. Yeah. They will be drafting more than 7. You will be getting that tattoo.
I never said that I was doing that. I don't know why. This rumor's got to go away as soon as possible.
Into existence.
So one of the things, speaking of rumors, Ian Rappaport over the weekend said that the latest he's hearing with the number 3 overall pick, Trey Lance, McCorkle Jones are the top 2 guys, which again kind of goes back to something you've been saying a long time on the show about Justin Fields, about how several teams are lower on Justin Fields than many of the fans seem to be. Mm-hmm. So comes down to those 2 quarterbacks. What does that mean for what the 49ers are ultimately selecting there? What do you believe? And then what does it mean for what the Broncos will have available to them?
We've said for a long time on the show that we didn't believe the Mac Jones hype that Trey Lance was the people I've talked to. I think it could be either one of them, but I still think it's Trey Lance, and I'm not coming off that for now. Maybe I will in the next couple of days, but for right now, I still think it's Trey Lance. It just makes sense on several levels. Those 2 quarterbacks being the smartest 2 quarterbacks in this draft makes a lot of sense for Kyle Shanahan. That's what he values. I think that they're down on Mac Jones by any means, but I think both those 2 are in play, and for me, Trey Lance just makes more sense. In the end, I think if you're the Denver Broncos, you want Mac Jones to be the pick. You see other reports out there. You see all these people saying all these things. I think if you're the Denver Broncos, you want Mac Jones to be the pick.
Well, one of the latest rumors, and I want to say this was from ESPN, the latest rumor is that Kyle Shanahan's the one that likes McCorkle Jones, where the scouting department likes Trey Lance a little bit more. So this is a little bit of that internal dialogue as it relates to what they ultimately decide.
I would say that there's truth to that. And you can go back and look at Kyle and his father's, honestly, preferences at quarterback. and kind of see that they're willing to sacrifice tools for the cerebral portion of it. But, for some people, it doesn't make sense to go from Jimmy Garoppolo to Mac Jones. I don't think it does personally. I mean, because you're not gaining anything. Are you trading up to get somebody who's going to elevate the offense? And I don't believe that Mac Jones does that. I believe he's an absolutely fine point guard and that he could run an offense and he could be just fine and successful in the NFL. That's not a problem. But what does he do to elevate that offense beyond where Jimmy G is right now? Does he have a stronger arm than Jimmy? No. So what is it that he does beyond what Jimmy Garoppolo's already safe with the football? So what is it that he does better? And that's the thing that kind of bothers me and jumps out at me and sticks with me in all this is that Trey Lance, if you develop him, if you are the QB guru and savant and all that, if he, when he gets ready to start, he elevates the offense. And, he adds a dimension that Mac Jones doesn't. And so I think for me, that's just the direction I lean.
It seems like, and I know that you sort of hate this, but we come back to this, the whole taking a quarterback just to take a quarterback. No offense to Mac Jones, but that's what he feels like to me. Like if the Broncos selected Mac Jones because that's what James Palmer ultimately went with on his mock over the weekend, and he got destroyed for it.
Yeah.
But I come back to this, okay, well, that doesn't mean that the Broncos hate Mac Jones or love Mac Jones. It's just what his read on it is right now. But I think for a lot of fans, selecting Mac Jones in the top 10 would feel as though taking a quarterback for quarterback's sake.
Right. And I talked to James, by the way, last night for a little while about that. And he's like, well, our mock got drunk after pick 3, which wasn't happening. So I just did what I thought would be the best in that situation. And he's kind of right. Given the situation that was there, he kind of did what was right. But, James is a good dude. And we have him on the show all the time. I think that it would. Mac Jones would be taking a quarterback for quarterback's sake. He doesn't really fit the profile of what Pat Shurmur likes. Certainly doesn't fit the profile of what Mike Shula likes. Although, you go back and you look at George Payton and some of the Minnesota quarterbacks, he does kind of fit into that mold. So, we're getting down to it. Try to relax. Try not to be uptight about it. You're going to hear a lot of things over the last couple of days as people throw things at a wall to try to gain some credibility. Just relax, like Aaron Rodgers says.
I like that. And I remember your tweet from this weekend on the same thing. So when we come back, though, you said that it might make sense for the Broncos to trade back. Let's talk about the sweet spot of the first round where that would make sense. We'll get to that coming up next. Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight, going over the possibilities for the Broncos on night 1 of the NFL draft. And one of those, as you brought up in the last segment, was to trade back. So in your opinion, what does that look like as far as the sweet spot of it? What would you be looking to gain as far as future draft capital, a spot in the middle of the first round that makes a lot of sense for the Broncos to still get an impact player like we were talking about?
Well, they definitely want to accumulate more draft picks this year, too. But they want to draft, they want players for next year, accumulate capital. They want to have kind of that rolling capital going forward. If you're a new general manager, doesn't that make sense to start off your tenure as acquiring capital to continue to be able to roll forward into future drafts? They do want to do a bit of that. The sweet spot, I don't think they'd want to go back further than Chicago. I think that's
at
probably
20? Okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably the spot. And then you can look and see, what's available there. If Washington doesn't move up to get a quarterback, they're probably on JOK, and that might be a guy you might be interested in. What's in that spot? What's in that range that you could use? Najee Harris, is he still there? That's somebody you could pair with Melvin Gordon. And then when Melvin leaves after this year, you've got your bell cow back. Zaven Collins, a versatile linebacker that's just as comfortable going away from the ball as he is downhill. And oh, by the way, he's bulked up to 270. You can put him almost anywhere in that linebacking core. It's a versatile chess piece Vic Fangio likes. So I think there are options there, and I think that's kind of the idea. You can look at offensive linemen, you can look at all kinds of things, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot.
And I don't know, because we had talked about, and there was the report out there that the Broncos talked to the Miami Dolphins, and you had said that was the Dolphins talking about they potentially wanted to move back from 6 to 9. But they do have another pick, which is at pick number 18. And so there's always the possibility that the Miami Dolphins, for whatever reason, because they have a ton of draft capital, they're already a fairly young team in many fronts. Maybe they're a team that actually thinks, we're going to keep our 6th overall pick, get the receiver we want, and then we're going to trade up to 9 because there's somebody else we really love. Maybe trading back to 18, which again, kind of in that frame of being near that Chicago pick at number 20 would make a lot of sense because you'd have a potential shot at their Kwity Paye, one of the best defensive ends. You'd have a good shot, as you mentioned, at JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, if you want to go on the defensive side. Top cornerback, maybe Caleb Farley even is sitting around there, a guy that for most of the pre-draft process, everybody had mocked to the Broncos until they more or less shored up their cornerback situation in free agency. But I'm with you. I think that's kind of right in there because you could still get a starting caliber player right there in a good spot in the draft.
Yeah. Let's clarify that Miami Dolphins called. The Dolphins called the Broncos, and that was initially about the move back. Broncos didn't call them about moving up. Dolphins
sorry if I
No, not you.
that.
I just want to clarify for everybody because I've seen 15 different variations of what I said. So let's go ahead. Let's go clarify it. The Dolphins called the Broncos, not the other way around, about seeing what it would cost. They want to know what it's like to move back if their guy isn't there at 6, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Broncos had continuing conversations with them about the pick later. So both actually happened in this phone call. The Broncos not really interested in moving up at this point in time. So, and I don't believe that they will be. But like I said. Last-minute changes can change everything. So.
Based on the compensation, though, for the Broncos, and this is why I like the Miami Dolphins there at number 18 so much, based on the compensation that would be involved, you would be able to get some future picks because the Miami Dolphins have already loaded up significantly with future picks. Could you get a future first in that scenario moving from 18 to 9?
I think so.
It seems like it's right there. It's so
right
close.
on the border.
And Miami's got multiple in the next couple of drafts. They seem like the team that at this point, look, they acquired 4 first rounders in the Laramie Tunsil trade overall now.
Right. I think you're looking at probably a future second in that scenario. If the framework of that is the Buffalo move up for Pat Mahomes, you moved from 27 to 10, and that was a first and a third. So I think if you're Denver and you're in this situation, you might be able to get a future first out of it. More likely to get a future second and a current third, that kind of thing, and then you can continue to move that third back into multiple day 3 picks and get the number of picks that you want this year closer to 10 or 11 versus the 7 that some people, I'm not going to mention any particular Ryan Edwards, have suggested.
The reason I've said that, okay, I want to clear something up. First of all, I never, ever said that I would do a tattoo if I'm wrong.
Lower hemisphere left cheek, that's what I heard.
This is the reason I said the 7 picks. The reason I said the 7 picks is a multifaceted thing. It's not based on so much of what George Payton has done historically, because you're right, he likes a lot of draft picks. It's more about this specific draft. It's about the unknowns and not having a combine and the medicals and the opt-outs. It's more about the unknowns of these players and seeing that after you get through the first 100, 150 players, there's going to be kind of more so dart throws than usual. You're not going to have all the information you wanted as usual in this draft. And so it would seem like a great opportunity if there are teams that really feel like they just need to have players now. Great, take all the players you want. I'm going to kick the can to next year. And in that sense, I'm also positioning myself to go get a quarterback that I want next year if for some reason things don't work out this year. See, for me, this is kind of a multi-level thing. It's about this draft being a very unique one, coupled with the fact that you really would like to have a lot of draft picks next year when you might be chasing a quarterback.
I think there's truth to that. I think that philosophically, you need to look at this draft for the Denver Broncos as such. They know that they have some roster turnover that's coming. All right. And so I think that they need to build depth at those positions, whether that's the safety with Kareem Jackson, whether that's the edge potentially with Von Miller, et cetera. They also want to acquire capital for future drafts. I think it is going to be 10 picks this year when all's said and done. I think that they want future picks as well. So I think it's a combination of both.
When we come back, other quarterback options that are more the veteran style instead of rookie. We'll get to that next. Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. We're a couple of nights away from the NFL Draft, and the Broncos will look to address their quarterback position in a couple of different ways, potentially in the draft. They could also look for one of the veteran options, and it was thrown out there by Peter King on Football Morning in America that Teddy Bridgewater would make the most sense. He put it like this. He said, "It won't surprise me if the Broncos do not draft a quarterback. to see Denver make a mid-round deal for Teddy Bridgewater with Carolina. Why does that make sense to you?
Well, there's the relationship with George Payton and Pat Shurmur already. Carolina wants to be rid of Teddy Bridgewater. They've wanted to be rid of him since last year. They're not going to keep him around, I can tell you that. There's certain dysfunction, and you and I know this from speaking with people who are in that building. There's dysfunction there, and he's obviously not happy with the situation, hasn't been happy with the situation last year. They kind of took the ball out of his hands a lot in the red zone. He believed he could make throws there. They didn't believe he could make throws there, et cetera. If you're the Denver Broncos, you're not trading for that contract, though. That's the problem. So you're going to have to find a way for Carolina to eat half of it, whatever. The other part of this is if you're Denver, you can wait him out because he's not going to be a Panther next year. So, if you're the Broncos, you can wait him out a little bit and kind of figure out if they cut him, maybe you have a chance to do all that. But as far as the connecting dots portion of it, there's a relationship with Pat Shurmur, a relationship with George Payton.
Right. And so that's what this comes down to is the relationships, and I think that's why a lot of people are tying this. And he represents at least competition. Like, I think regardless of what you actually think about Teddy Bridgewater and his ceiling and whether or not he represents the elite quarterback play that you ultimately need, he probably doesn't. But he would represent competition. And so this seems like, as he's pointing it out, a mid-round deal for Teddy Bridgewater. Now, I know Broncos fans are not going to do backflips over Teddy Bridgewater. I don't necessarily expect them to do that. But if we go back to the idea of what the Broncos are looking for here, they're looking to build the war chest. They're looking to bring in competition, and they've said from the very beginning that this is about bringing in somebody that they think could be better than their current situation, and if he's not, then they've just decided not to go after him. Teddy Bridgewater, I think for George Payton, would probably be a guy that he sees as somebody that could be better than Drew Lock, at least in the short term.
Well, the question mark really becomes, are any of these guys beating out Drew Lock to be a day one starter?
Right.
And I can tell you that there are people in that building that absolutely do not believe that Justin Fields or Trey Lance are beating him out year one.
Yeah, and Peter King even threw in there, he's like, I think by Halloween, maybe Trey Lance is... They don't believe that. Because that's who he mocked to him.
Right. They don't believe that. They believe that neither one of those guys are year one starters. So if that's the case, which of those two is the highest upside guy? Trey Lance. And then what do you do from there? That still precludes that Drew Lock's your starter for this year. So, is that really the move that you make? Do you burn a first-round pick on a guy who's not going to play for you this year, potentially? Then you go over to the other side of it, Teddy Bridgewater. You bring him in, he's reliable, but is he, does he improve you? Really? I don't know. He's competition. He's certainly more efficient between the 20s, but at the end of the day, he had fewer passing touchdowns than Drew Lock did last year. In fact, he's never had more than 15 passing touchdowns, the most he had last year. So, I don't know that he represents a significant upgrade. I don't know that the team looks at it as anything more than competition and maybe a bridge guy to new water with a quarterback, all puns intended.
If the Broncos end up with Teddy Bridgewater, what are we saying about their plan this offseason to upgrade the position?
I think it didn't go the way exactly that they wanted. I think they brought in competition, and they're pushing all their chips in on Drew Lock, making the improvement in training camp. If you bring Teddy Bridgewater in, you're bringing him in as a backup that pushes Drew Lock. You're not bringing him in as a guy that, like, hey, we feel comfortable with this as being the starter.
I agree.
And, if he wins the job, he wins the job, but you're not bringing him in to be that guy. And telling Carolina to eat half his deal is proof of that.
Very much so. So, I think that it needs to be framed that way. What mid-round pick makes sense to you?
Oh, you throw a fourth at him, fifth, whatever. It's not. It's irrelevant at that point. You don't want to give a pick away in the top, 10 to 20 picks of the fourth round, but everything after that is interchangeable.
The other name that could be available on draft night, according to Peter King, is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, up to this point, the 49ers have maintained that they're going to draft a quarterback at 3, and Jimmy Garoppolo is still in the mix. But as George Payton even mentioned in his pre-draft press conference, those things can change on draft night. And all of a sudden, there could be a potential there. We know the relationship exists between the 49ers and the Broncos, more so John Elway and John Lynch, but Elway is still in the building, and he's going to be in the war room there. So if you had the options based on mid-round compensation, which would you rather have?
Well, the 49ers are saying that they want a first-rounder for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Which is never going to happen.
So, no.
Yeah.
And why are you trading for a quarterback in any event that wasn't good enough to take one team to a Super Bowl and expecting him to take yours? Jimmy Garoppolo, they had to hide him during that Super Bowl run, and then he flamed out, especially in the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl game. So, could they make him available if they take Mac Jones? Yeah. If they take Trey Lance, I don't think they make him available. But if they take Mac Jones, yes, he could be available. I don't see the Broncos being in the bidding simply because of what the cost would be for him. It's going to be a first or a second rounder, for Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what you're going to pay for him. Teddy Bridgewater, you talk about a fourth or a fifth, they'd be in on that.
What about Gardner Minshew? It seems like a popular name for a lot of Broncos fans because also the expectation is going to be a mid to late draft pick.
I think so. I think you're fourth or fifth for Gardner Minshew, and I'd rather have him, honestly. There's some upside there. I don't know. I mean, the Jaguars obviously are drafting Trevor Lawrence, and they've got C.J. Beathard, but they may feel comfortable with Gardner Minshew being their backup, until his contract runs out, and they can kind of hold him hostage. They're in an actionable position, so the Broncos can't force them to do anything, whereas with Carolina, they've got to figure out how to dump the guy they've got.
Right. And then the last one, Nick Foles, who you had said from the very beginning of this whole process that's a name to keep an eye on because of his relationship to Vic Fangio's relationship to knowing this scheme. What do you think about him?
It's still a name to know. I think that's the fallback option, and it has always been kind of the fallback option. There are people that said, for months that wasn't even in consideration. Well, now they're all like, it's the other option. Funny how that works out. I think that the main thing to remember there is just that, he's a guy and there's a relationship there. But I think that if Jacksonville holds Gardner Minshew hostage and Carolina's unwilling to redo the deal, then I think that's the pivot.
All right. All very exciting. The NFL draft is coming up on the other side. Keep it locked on Broncos Country Tonight and the Broncos YouTube channel for more updates.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.